Dance with me. Korean mafia hadn't felt alive for 10 years until the black woman grabbed him. He hadn't felt the burn of rage in 10 years. Not since the night his family died and left him with nothing but a frozen heart and a kingdom built on blood debts. Kang Tae-oh ruled Seoul's shadows with silence, never raising his voice, never showing mercy, never feeling anything at all. Until the night she walked into his club, grabbed his wrist as rival syndicate members closed in, and pulled him onto the dance floor. Her dark skin glowed under red lights. Her eyes dared him to follow, and for the first time since he was 16, his pulse hammered in his chest. She moved like salvation wrapped in danger, and he realized with terrifying clarity, he would burn the entire underworld to keep her. Welcome back, besties. I want to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Creating these stories for you has become more than just storytelling. It's become a conversation, a connection that stretches across oceans and cultures. Your support keeps this channel alive. Now let's dive into this story together. The club pulsed with bass so deep it vibrated through the marble floors. Crimson light sliced through smoke and expensive perfume, illuminating faces that didn't ask questions. This was Eclipse, Kang Tae-oh's fortress disguised as entertainment, where politicians rubbed shoulders with CEOs who paid protection money, where information flowed like champagne and everyone understood the cost of discretion. Tae-oh watched from the upper gallery, fingers resting on the glass railing. Below, bodies moved in manufactured ecstasy, unaware that every corner held cameras, every table was bugged, every bartender reported directly to him. He'd built this empire from ash and fury after the car accident that killed his parents and younger sister. The rival organization responsible had been dismantled piece by piece. No evidence, no witnesses, just quiet. Disappearances that sent a message through Seoul's criminal underworld. Kang Tae-oh felt nothing, and that made him unstoppable. Boss, his second-in-command, Min-jun, appeared at his elbow. Park Sung-ho just arrived. 3rd floor, northeast corner. Tae-oh's expression didn't change. Park Sung-ho ran the docks, controlled the shipping routes Tae-oh needed for the legitimate pharmaceutical company that laundered his operations. But Park had been skimming, pocketing profits, testing boundaries. Let him wait, Tae-oh said softly. His voice never rose above conversation level. Men who shouted had something to prove. Another 15 minutes. That's when he saw her. She cut through the crowd like a flame through silk. Tall, curves wrapped in a gold dress that caught every light, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that made her neck look impossibly long. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped his breath. It was the way she moved with absolute confidence through a space designed to intimidate, her dark eyes scanning the room like she owned it, like she'd never learned to make herself smaller for anyone's comfort. Tae-oh's fingers tightened on the railing. Who is she? The words left his mouth before conscious thought. Min-jun followed his gaze. Unknown. No reservation under any name we recognize. Paid cash at the door. Impossible. Eclipse didn't take walk-ins. The door policy was strict, the guest list curated. Tae-oh opened his mouth to demand answers when the woman's eyes lifted and locked directly onto his through the crowd, across the impossible distance between the dance floor and the gallery. Time fractures when recognition happens without introduction. She smiled, not flirtatious, not nervous, and started walking toward the stairs that led to the VIP section. His section. The area that required explicit permission and 3 separate security clearances. Stop her, Tae-oh said, but his voice came out strangely, hoarse. Min-jun spoke rapidly into his wrist communicator. 2 security guards materialized at the base of the stairs. The woman paused, tilted her head, then did something unexpected. She laughed. The sound carried even over the music, rich and unafraid. She turned back toward the main floor, but instead of leaving, she positioned herself directly in his sightline. Then she began to dance. Not the grinding, mechanical movements of the other patrons. She moved like music was a language she'd been born speaking, her body telling stories in rhythm and pause, in the arch of her spine and the sweep of her arms. People around her slowed, stopped, watched. She commanded attention without demanding it, powerful in her joy, magnetic in her freedom. Tayo couldn't look away. His chest felt tight, his pulse hammered in his ears, louder than the bass, louder than the decade of silence he'd wrapped around his heart. This was danger. This was loss of control. This was everything he'd systematically eliminated from his life. "Boss?" Minjun sounded concerned. "Your meeting with Park. Cancelled." Tayo was already moving toward the stairs. "Sir?" He didn't explain. Explanations were for people who answered to someone. He descended through his own club like a man possessed, his carefully constructed calm cracking with each step. The crowd parted automatically. They always did. But she didn't notice his approach. Her eyes were closed, lost in the music, in herself, in some private world he desperately wanted to enter. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough to catch her perfume. Cocoa butter and something sweet. Something that made him think of summer afternoons he'd never had. Childhood joy he'd never experienced. She spun and her eyes opened, landing on him with the force of collision. Up close, she was devastating. High cheekbones, full lips curved in perpetual amusement, eyes the color of dark honey that held intelligence and challenge in equal measure, a small scar above her left eyebrow, a beauty mark at the corner of her mouth, details he catalogued with frightening intensity. "You're in my club," he said, and hated how it sounded like an accusation when he meant it as a question. "Your club." She didn't stop moving, just incorporated him into her orbit, dancing around him like he was part of the choreography. "Funny. I thought clubs belonged to the music." Her accent was American, East Coast, educated, with a warmth that suggested Southern roots somewhere in her family tree. "Everything here belongs to me." He meant it as a warning. It came out as a confession. She laughed again, that same unguarded sound. "How exhausting for you." Then she grabbed his wrist. The touch shot through him like electricity, like the defibrillator paddles they'd used on him in the hospital after the accident, shocking his dead heart back into painful rhythm. Her skin was warm against his, her pulse steady and strong where her fingers wrapped around his wrist. "Dance with me," she said, and it wasn't a question. Tayo didn't dance. He hadn't danced since his sister's 12th birthday party, the week before she died. Dancing was vulnerability, was joy, was all the things he'd buried with his family. He started. But she was already pulling him deeper into the crowd, into the center of the floor, where light and shadow tangled, where his security couldn't easily follow, where for a moment he was just a man and not a monster. "Everyone dances," she said, placing his hand on her waist. The gold fabric was slippery and warm under his palm. "You've just forgotten how." The song changed. Something slower, more deliberate, with a rhythm that made the air feel thick. She moved closer, and Tayo's training, years of martial arts, of combat strategy, of reading opponents, failed him completely. His body responded without permission, matching her movements, his free hand coming up to rest on her shoulder blade, feeling the shift of muscles beneath smooth skin. "What's your name?" His voice was rough. "Does it matter?" She looked up at him through thick lashes. "You'll just run a background check the moment I leave." She wasn't wrong. He was already memorizing every detail, already planning the investigation. But he wanted to hear it from her lips. "It matters." Something in his tone made her study him more carefully. Her smile softened, became real instead of amused. "Sage? Sage Bennett." "Sage," He tested the name, the way it felt in his mouth. Earthy and clean, and utterly unsuited to the dark world he inhabited. What are you doing in Seoul? Living. The simple word held weight. Trying something different. Choosing myself for once. Before he could ask what that meant, before he could catalog the pain that flickered across her face, chaos erupted. Glass shattered somewhere near the bar. Shouts cut through the music. Taeyo's training snapped back into place instantly, his body shifting to put himself between Sage and whatever threat had emerged. His security team was already moving, guests scattering, and through the panicked crowd he saw them. 4 men in dark suits, faces he recognized from Park Sung-ho's organization. The insult was deliberate. Park had brought muscle to Taeyo's own territory, a direct challenge to his authority. This would have to be answered publicly, violently, in ways that made Taeyo's stomach turn even as his face remained impassive. "Stay behind me," he ordered Sage, his voice dropping into the cold register that made grown men confess to crimes unprompted. But she didn't listen. Instead, Sage Bennett did the most foolish, brave, impossible thing. She stepped forward, putting herself between Taeyo and Park's men, and smiled like she'd just been invited to a party she'd been waiting all her life to attend. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying, over the dying music, over the frightened whispers, over the sound of Min Jun chambering around somewhere behind them. "This seems like a terrible waste of a good song. Surely we can all be reasonable adults." One of Park's men laughed, but the sound was ugly. "Girl, you don't know what you've walked into. Step aside before you get hurt." Taeyo's vision tunneled. The thought of these men, any men, threatening her, made something feral and ancient rise up in his chest. His hand moved toward the weapon hidden in his jacket, but Sage caught his movement. "Don't." She said it quietly, just for him. Not for this. Not yet. How did she know? How could this stranger read the violence in him so clearly? "This is my territory," Taeyo said, his voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent club. "Park Sung-ho sends 4 men to my establishment without invitation, without respect, and expects what? To be taken seriously?" The lead enforcer's face tightened. "Park wants to renegotiate terms. Tonight." Then Park should have called for an appointment. Taeyo felt Sage's warmth at his back, the subtle way she hadn't actually moved away from him despite the danger. Instead, he insults me in front of guests. There will be consequences. The tension stretched taut as wire. Taeyo could feel his men positioned throughout the club, weapons ready, waiting for his signal. One word, and this would become a bloodbath. One word, and he'd prove to Sage exactly what kind of man had been holding her on the dance floor. The thought made him hesitate. "I'll give you 10 seconds, Sage said suddenly, addressing Park's men with the confidence of someone used to high-stakes negotiations. "To walk out of here with your dignity intact. Mr. Kang and Park Sung-ho can handle their business in daylight, like professionals. Or you can stay, and I promise you'll regret the hospital bills." The lead enforcer blinked. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's tired of men compensating for their insecurities by breaking glass in nightclubs." She crossed her arms. 10, 9, 8. To Taeyo's absolute shock, they looked at each other, looked at him, and made the smart choice. The lead enforcer spat on the floor, a final insult, but jerked his head toward the exit. His men followed. The moment they disappeared through the door, the club exhaled collectively. Music resumed, quieter than before. Conversations restarted in hushed, excited tones. By morning, this story would be all over Seoul's underground. The night Kang Taeyo let men walk out alive after disrespecting him on his own territory. All because a woman in a gold dress had asked him to. Taeyo turned to face her, and for the first time in a decade, He didn't know what to say. She'd seen him ready to kill. She'd stepped between him and violence like it was nothing. She'd de-escalated a situation that should have ended in blood and somehow made him look stronger for showing restraint. That was either incredibly brave or phenomenally stupid, he finally managed. Sage shrugged, but he could see the adrenaline making her hands shake slightly. Little bit of both, probably. I have a bad habit of jumping in when I shouldn't. She met his eyes. Are you going to be okay? They'll retaliate. They'll try. He studied her face, memorizing the concern there, the genuine worry for a stranger who definitely didn't deserve it. Why did you do that? Because I've seen what violence does to people. Her voice went soft. And you looked like someone who'd regret it in the morning, even if you'd never admit it. She saw too much, understood too clearly. This woman was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with weapons or threats. I need to get you home, Teo said. Park will know you interfered. He'll want to know who you are. I can take care of myself. Not against him. Not in this city. He gentled his tone with effort. Please, let me make sure you're safe. Sage studied him for a long moment, and Tayo had the strange sensation of being X-rayed, of having his soul examined and weighed. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. Okay, but just to my apartment door. No coming inside. Agreed. The word tasted like a lie. Already his mind was working, planning, calculating how to protect her, how to keep her close, how to make sure Park Sung-ho never even thought her name. As they walked toward the exit, Min-jun fell into step beside them. Tayo could feel his second-in-command's curiosity, his concern, his confusion about why protocol had been shattered. But Tayo didn't explain. He simply kept his hand on the small of Sage's back, guiding her through the club that suddenly felt too small, too crowded, too insufficient to contain what was happening in his chest. Outside, Seoul's night air hit them cold and sharp. Tayo's car waited at the curb, black, expensive, windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. His driver opened the door without a word. Sage paused before getting in. This is a really bad idea. Probably. He waited, giving her the choice, even though every instinct screamed to simply secure her safety by any means necessary. But let me do this one thing. Then you never have to see me again. The words hurt to say. She must have heard it, because her expression softened. Something tells me that's not how this ends. She slid into the car, and Tayo followed, closing the door on the world outside. The interior was all leather and silence, soundproofed against surveillance. Min-jun took the front seat next to the driver, his presence a reminder that they were never truly alone. Where to? The driver asked. Sage gave an address in Itaewon, the international district, a neighborhood where a black American woman would blend in easier, where the questions would be fewer. Smart. They drove in silence for 3 blocks. Teo was hyper-aware of every inch between them on the seat, the way city lights painted shifting patterns across her face, the rise and fall of her breathing. His hands itched to reach for her, to confirm she was real, that the last 30 minutes had actually happened. You're staring, Sage said without looking at him. Yes, she turned then, eyebrows raised. Just, yes. No smooth denial. I'm not smooth. I'm direct. He held her gaze. And you're the most interesting thing that's happened to me in 10 years. That's a hell of a line. It's the truth. He shifted slightly toward her. What brought you to Eclipse tonight? Of all the clubs in Seoul, why mine? Sage was quiet for a moment, watching the city slide past. Honestly, I liked the name. Eclipse. Like something ending and beginning at the same time. I'm trying to figure out who I am when no one's watching, no one's judging, when I can just be. Running from something? Toward something, actually. She smiled, but it was bittersweet. 6 months ago I was engaged. Perfect life on paper. Corporate lawyer, fiancé who looked good in pictures, apartment in D.C. Then I found out he'd been cheating with my best friend since before he proposed. So I quit everything, sold everything, bought a one-way ticket. Teo felt a surge of rage toward a man he'd never met. He was an idiot. That surprised a laugh out of her. Most definitely. But so was I, for not seeing it. I built this whole life around making other people happy, being what they expected. Korea was random. I threw darts at a map, literally. Figured it was time to be brave. You succeeded. The words came out more intense than intended. Walking into my club, stepping between armed men, getting in this car with me. That's not just brave. He didn't have words for what it was. Revolutionary. Terrifying. Perfect. The car slowed, pulling up to a modest apartment building with a convenience store on the ground floor. Sage reached for the door handle, then paused. Kang Tae-oh, she said, testing his name the way he'd tested hers. Thank you for the ride, and for not making tonight bloodier than it needed to be. He should let her go. Should watch her walk inside and never think of her again. Should protect her by staying far away, because everyone who got close to him ended up destroyed. His parents. His sister. The few friends he'd tried to keep in high school before accepting his role in the family business. But when she opened the door and started to step out, Teo heard himself say, "Have dinner with me." Sage froze halfway out of the car. Slowly, she turned back. What? Tomorrow. Dinner. Somewhere public, well lit. Your choice of location. He was making this up as he went, operating on instinct rather than strategy. I want to hear more about your dart-throwing method of life decisions. She seemed genuinely surprised. You run a criminal empire. I just ruined your reputation by making you show mercy. Why would you want dinner? Because for the first time in 10 years, I felt something other than anger. The confession escaped before he could cage it. And I'm not ready for that to end. Honesty. It disarmed her. He could see it in the way her expression shifted from cautious to curious. She bit her lower lip, thinking, and Teo had to actively stop himself from staring at her mouth. One dinner, she finally said. Public place. I choose where. And if at any point I want to leave, you don't follow. Deal? Deal. The word felt like victory. She gave him her number, which he immediately memorized before saving it in his phone. Then she was gone, disappearing into her building with a small wave that did strange things to his chest. Min-jun waited until they'd pulled away from the curb before speaking. Boss, with all due respect, what the hell was that? I don't know. Teo stared out the window, already counting hours until tomorrow. But find out everything about Sage Bennett, where she works, who she knows, where she goes, and put a security detail on her building. Discreet. She doesn't see them. Park, Sung-ho. Gets a visit tomorrow morning, early. I want him to understand that sending men to Eclipse was his last mistake. Teo's voice went cold again, the warmth Sage had sparked already banking itself back into familiar ice. But no permanent damage. I'm not starting a war over poor judgment. This was new territory. The old Tae-oh would have eliminated Park, made an example, sent a message through very final means. But Sage's voice echoed in his head. You looked like someone who'd regret it in the morning. She was right, and he hated and loved her for it. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When they reached his penthouse, top 3 floors of a building in Gangnam, security tighter than most government facilities. Tae-oh dismissed Min-jun and headed straight for the windows that overlooked the city. Seoul glittered below him, a kingdom built on secrets and power. He'd never wanted more than this. Control, respect, the certainty that no one would ever take anything from him again. Emotion was weakness. connection was vulnerability. Love was the fastest path to destruction. Then why did his chest still feel tight? Why could he still smell cocoa butter and feel the ghost of her hand in his? Why did every carefully constructed wall feel suddenly inadequate? His phone buzzed. An unknown number, though he'd already saved it. Sage. For the record, I think you're dangerous, but so am I. See you tomorrow. S. Teo read the message 3 times, a smile tugging at lips that had forgotten how. Dangerous? Yes. They were both bombs waiting to explode, and dinner tomorrow felt like lighting the fuse. He texted back, I'll try to behave. Toi. Her response came immediately. Please don't. Where's the fun in that? And for the first time in a decade, Kang Teo laughed alone in his penthouse, the sound strange and rusty, but unmistakably real. Whatever happened next, war with Park, complications from Eclipse, the 100 threats that came with his territory, he would face it. Because tomorrow, he had dinner with a woman who made him feel alive, and that was worth any price. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray light that made Seoul look washed in watercolor. Teo hadn't slept. Instead, he'd spent the hours reading the dossier Min Jun had compiled on Sage Bennett, with frightening efficiency. 30 years old, born in Atlanta, raised in Maryland, Howard University undergrad, Georgetown Law, top of her class, joined a prestigious D.C. firm specializing in international corporate law. Engagement to Marcus Webb, fellow attorney, ended abruptly 6 months ago. No criminal record, no debts. Parents deceased. Car accident when she was 19. One brother, military, currently stationed in Germany. The file was comprehensive, but somehow told him nothing important. It didn't explain the sadness he'd glimpsed beneath her confidence, or the way she'd moved through his club like she was reclaiming something stolen. It didn't capture the texture of her laugh or the intelligence burning behind her careful words. He was still studying her Georgetown ID photo, formal, guarded, nothing like the woman who'd grabbed his wrist last night, when Min Jun knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Park Sung-ho is downstairs, Min Jun said. He came alone. Says he wants to apologize. Teo set down the file. Alone means he's scared. Good. They descended to the private office on the 40th floor, where Teo conducted business that required discretion. The room was all glass and steel, minimalist, except for the calligraphy scrolls his mother had loved, the only pieces he'd saved from the family home before selling it. Park Sung-ho stood by the window, a man in his 50s, with silver at his temples, and the kind of nervous energy that preceded either violence or capitulation. He turned when Teo entered, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Teo si, Park began, using the respectful suffix like it could erase last night's insult. I came to explain. You sent 4 men to my establishment. Teo's voice was quiet, conversational. He poured himself tea from the service Min Jun had prepared, didn't offer any to Park. Without warning, without respect. To what, Park? Intimidate me? To get your attention. Park's jaw tightened. You've been ignoring my calls for 2 weeks. The new shipping rates you're demanding are unreasonable. The rates are fair market value, plus the cost of your repeated attempts to skim from our mutual ventures. Teo sipped his tea. Did you think I wouldn't notice? That my accountants wouldn't catch the discrepancies? Park's face went pale. I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want compliance. Teo set down his cup with deliberate care. Here's what happens next. You accept the new rates. You pay back the money you stole. I'll send you the exact figure. It's substantial. And you never, ever bring weapons into my territory again. And if I refuse? Then I make a phone call, and by lunch, your shipping license gets revoked. Tax authorities will audit your operations. Your wife will receive documentation of your apartment in Busan, where you keep your mistress. Teo's expression didn't change. I don't make threats, Park. I make promises. Choose." The silence stretched. Outside, Seoul continued its morning routine, oblivious to the small war being negotiated 40 floors above the street. Finally, Park bowed, not deep enough to be sincere, but enough to signal surrender. "The new rates are acceptable." "Excellent." Teo stood, indicating the meeting was over. "And Park? The woman who was with me last night. Her name never crosses your lips. You never saw her. If I hear you've so much as asked about her, our agreement ends. Understood?" Park's eyes flickered with curiosity, but he was smart enough to simply nod. "Understood." After he left, Min-jun raised an eyebrow. "You let him off easy." "I'm in a good mood." Tayo checked his watch. 9 a.m., hours still until dinner. "The security detail on Sage's building. Any issues?" "Quiet night. She left at 7 a.m. for a run along the Han River, stopped at a cafe, went home. Currently she's inside." The fact that Teo knew her schedule should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt necessary, like checking that the sun had risen or his heart was still beating. He needed to know she was safe, that Park's men hadn't connected her to last night's humiliation, that she was still in his city and real and breathing. "I want the detail maintained, 24 hours. "Boss!" Min-jun's tone carried warning. "Getting attached is dangerous. You know this." "I'm not attached." The lie tasted bitter. "I'm being cautious." Min-jun didn't argue, but his expression said he wasn't fooled. They'd known each other since high school, before the accident, before Teo had inherited an empire built on his grandfather's ruthlessness. Min-jun had watched him bury his family, bury his emotions, become the ghost who ran the underworld. He'd also never seen Teo smile at a text message or check his phone compulsively. The rest of the morning crawled. Teo moved through meetings with suppliers, consulted with lawyers about the pharmaceutical company's quarterly reports, approved fund transfers that would look legitimate to any auditor. He existed in the careful space between legal and illegal, legitimate businessman and crime lord, and usually the duality didn't bother him. Today, he felt the weight of it, wondered what Sage would think if she knew the full extent of what he controlled. Wondered if the warmth in her eyes would freeze over when she learned exactly how many lives he'd destroyed to build his empire. At 4 p.m., she texted, "Magpie Kitchen, 7 p.m. It's a small place in Hongdae. Wear something casual. You'll stand out enough without the suit." "Sees." He smiled despite himself. She was managing him, setting boundaries, maintaining control. Smart. And completely futile, because he was already lost. Teo arrived at Magpie Kitchen 15 minutes early, which gave him time to assess. The restaurant was tiny, maybe 15 tables, walls covered in vintage posters and string lights. The menu was fusion, Korean ingredients prepared with international techniques, and the crowd was young, artistic, the kind of people who came for the food rather than to see or be seen. She'd chosen perfectly. This wasn't his world. No one here knew his name or feared his reputation. He was just another man waiting for dinner. Sage arrived exactly at 7, and Teo's breath caught. She wore jeans and a soft sweater the color of rust, her hair down in natural curls that framed her face. No makeup except something that made her lips look fuller, more tempting. She was devastating in gold, but like this, casual, unguarded, she was utterly disarming. "You actually wore something casual." She slid into the seat across from him, eyes sparkling. "I'm impressed." Teo glanced down at his dark jeans and simple black sweater. "I can follow instructions." "Somehow I doubt that." She accepted a menu from the server, thanked him in careful Korean that revealed she'd been studying. "How was your day? Any criminal empires fall?" "Just one small negotiation." He watched her scan the menu, memorizing the way she bit her lip when concentrating. "Park Sung-ho will no longer be a problem." Her eyes lifted to his, sharp and assessing, You didn't hurt him. It wasn't a question. No. But I made him understand the consequences of future mistakes. And what are those consequences? Do you really want to know? He kept his voice level, giving her the chance to retreat, to maintain plausible deniability. Sage set down the menu. I interfered last night because I believe people can choose differently. But I'm not naive, Tayo. I know what you are. What you do. So yes, I want to know what I'm sitting across from. The honesty was refreshing and terrifying. I ruin people financially. I destroy their reputations, their businesses, their leverage. I make them disappear from relevance without ever touching them physically. He held her gaze. I haven't killed anyone in 10 years. Not since I took over from my grandfather and restructured the organization. But I've destroyed plenty of lives, made families homeless, ended careers. All very legal technically. All completely ruthless. He waited for her to leave, to make an excuse, grab her bag, walk away from the monster he'd just confessed to being. Instead, Sage leaned forward, elbows on the table. Why did you stop killing? The question stunned him. Not judgment, not horror, just curiosity about his logic. Because I realized I was becoming something I couldn't recognize in the mirror, he said slowly. After my family died, I wanted revenge. I got it. Then I wanted power. I got that too. But every time I ordered someone's death, I felt nothing. And that terrified me more than grief ever did. So I found other ways. Cleaner ways. But you'd do it again. She said it with certainty. If someone threatened something you cared about. Yes. No hesitation. Without question. Sage nodded slowly, processing. At least you're honest. Marcus lied about everything. Where he was, who he was with, what he wanted. You're a criminal with a clearer moral code than my ex-fiancé. That's depressing. Or refreshing? She laughed, and the tension broke like a wave. Let's go with refreshing. Now, can we order? I'm starving, and they have this honey butter gochujang chicken that's apparently life-changing. They ordered too much food. Chicken, japchae, kimchi pancakes, experimental fusion dishes that shouldn't work but did. Sage ate with genuine enthusiasm, making small sounds of appreciation that did dangerous things to Teo's imagination. She told him about her first week in Seoul, the disasters of trying to navigate the subway, the kindness of strangers who'd helped her when she got lost. Everyone stares, she said, twirling noodles around her chopsticks. Which I expected, but it's different here. Not hostile, just curious. Like they're trying to figure out my story. You stand out. He said it like a compliment. Not just because you're beautiful. You have this energy, like you're fully present in every moment. It's magnetic. She paused mid-bite, chopsticks suspended. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time. Then people around you were blind. Sage set down her chopsticks, studying him with unsettling intensity. You do that a lot. Say exactly what you mean without filtering. Is that a cultural thing or a you thing? A me thing. I spent too many years saying nothing. Now, when I speak, it's usually the truth. Even when the truth is dangerous. Especially then. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that the space between them felt charged. Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. Why did you really come to Eclipse last night? You researched it, paid cash, knew exactly how to move through that space. That wasn't random. Sage was quiet for a long moment, absently tracing patterns in the condensation on her water glass. I wanted to test myself, to see if I could walk into a space that was clearly dangerous, and not just survive it, but own it. I spent my whole life being careful, being appropriate, coloring inside the lines. And where did it get me? Cheated on and planning a wedding to someone who never saw me. She met his eyes, I wanted to feel powerful, even if it was just for one night. And did you? Until armed men showed up? Absolutely. Her smile turned wry. After that, I just felt terrified, and trying really hard not to show it. You didn't show it. Teo's fingers finally closed the distance, brushing against hers. The contact was electric. You faced down men who would have killed you without hesitation, and you smiled like you were invincible. Fake it till you make it, right? But her hand turned over, palm up, an invitation. My brother always said I had more courage than sense. Teo laced his fingers through hers, marveling at the contrast. Her skin dark against his, her hand smaller, but somehow anchoring him more firmly than any weapon or threat. I think your brother was right. They sat like that as the restaurant filled and emptied around them, talking about everything and nothing. Sage told him about law school, about the cases she'd loved and hated, about her parents who died too young and left her feeling untethered. Teo found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, how he'd wanted to be a pianist before the accident, how his sister had loved astronomy, and they'd spent nights on their roof naming constellations, how sometimes he still woke up reaching for a family that no longer existed. I'm sorry, Sage said softly when he finished. Losing them like that. Suddenly, I know that particular kind of pain, the way it rewrites your whole story. Does it get easier? He didn't know why he asked. He'd lived with the grief for a decade, learned to function around it. Not easier, just different. You learn to carry it differently. She squeezed his hand. But you already know that. He did. But hearing her say it mattered somehow, validated the strange half-life he'd been living. By the time they left the restaurant, Seoul had transformed into its nighttime self. Neon and noise, couples walking hand in hand, street vendors selling roasted chestnuts. Teo wanted to stretch the evening indefinitely, to keep Sage in this bubble where nothing else existed. "Walk with me," he heard himself ask. She nodded, and they wandered through Hongdae's tangled streets without destination. At some point, Sage's hand found his again, and Teo thought about Minjun's warning. Getting attached is dangerous. Too late. He was already attached, already calculating how to keep her safe, already imagining a future where evenings like this were normal. "Tell me something," Sage said as they paused near a small park. "What happens after tonight? Do you go back to being Kong Teo, criminal mastermind, and I go back to being the weird American woman living in Itaewon? Is that what you want?" "I'm asking what you want." Teo turned to face her fully. The streetlights cast shifting shadows across. Her features made her eyes look almost gold. "I want to see you again. And again. I want to know what you look like first thing in the morning, and what you sound like when you're angry, and what makes you laugh until you can't breathe." The words came faster, unplanned. "I want to introduce you to my organization, and watch them try to reconcile the woman who faced down armed men with the woman who makes sounds of joy over gochujang chicken. I want—" He stopped, took a breath. "I want everything, and that should terrify you." Sage stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the pulse beating at her throat. "It does terrify me, because I want all of that too, and I just got out of a relationship that imploded. I should be gun-shy, should be protecting myself, should definitely not be falling for someone who runs a criminal empire." "Falling?" His heart hammered the word. "Falling," she confirmed, and then she kissed him. It wasn't soft or tentative. Sage kissed him like she'd grabbed his wrist at the club, with decision, with confidence, with the kind of certainty that made Teo's carefully controlled world tilt on its axis. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones, and he kissed her back with 10 years of frozen emotion suddenly melting all at once. She tasted like honey and spice, like courage and risk. Her fingers tangled in his hair, her body pressed against his, and Teo felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed since the night his family died, since he'd decided feeling nothing was safer than feeling everything. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sage rested her forehead against his. That was either really stupid or really right. Both. He couldn't stop touching her, his hand sliding down to her waist, keeping her close. Probably both. A car horn blared nearby, reminding them they were standing in public, visible, vulnerable. Teo's security instincts kicked back in. "Let me take you home. I can catch a taxi. Please." The single word held more weight than entire speeches. "Let me make sure you're safe." This time, when his car pulled up, Minjun had been following discreetly all evening, which Sage had definitely noticed, but graciously ignored. She got in without hesitation. The drive to Itaewon felt both too long and too short. Teo kept her hand in his, thumb tracing circles on her palm, neither of them speaking because words felt inadequate. When they reached her building, Sage turned to him. "Do you want to come up?" Everything in him screamed yes, but he forced himself to think past the desire, past the way his body was currently staging a revolt against his common sense. She deserved better than this, better than a rushed decision, better than waking up tomorrow with regrets. "Not tonight," he said, and watched surprise flicker across her face. "Not because I don't want to." God, Sage, I want to so badly I can barely think. But when I come up to your apartment, when we take that step, I want you to be completely sure. No doubts, no questions, no wondering if you're moving too fast. She blinked, and he saw something like wonder in her expression. Marcus never... She stopped, started again. He never thought about what I needed, only what he wanted. Then Marcus was an idiot in more ways than one. Teo lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. "I'll see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed, but didn't move to leave. "Teo, thank you. For tonight. For being unexpected in the best possible way." Then she was gone, slipping out of the car and into her building, and Teo watched until she disappeared inside, until the lights in what his security detail had informed him was her fourth-floor apartment flicked on. "She's good for you," Minjun said from the front seat, breaking protocol by offering unsolicited opinions. "I know. She's also going to complicate everything." "I know that, too." Teo leaned back against the leather seat, feeling exhausted and energized simultaneously. "I don't care. What if Park finds out? Or the other families? They'll see her as a weakness. Then they'll learn exactly what happens when people threaten what's mine." The possessiveness in his own voice should have alarmed him. Instead, it felt right. Natural. Inevitable. His phone buzzed. "Sage, still think you're dangerous, but I'm starting to think I don't mind. Sleep well, Teo." "S," he typed back. "Sleep well, Sage. Dream of me." T. Her response came immediately. "Arrogant. I like it." S. Teo smiled at his phone like a teenager, and Minjun very carefully didn't comment. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and escalating intensity. Teo saw Sage nearly every day. Coffee in the mornings before his meetings, lunch when her teaching schedule at the language academy where she'd found work allowed, dinners that stretched into late nights, walking through Seoul's endless neighborhoods. He learned that she sang off-key in the shower, that she was learning to cook Korean food with enthusiastic, if occasionally disastrous results, that she had a scar on her knee from falling out of a tree at age 10 while trying to prove something to her brother. She learned that he drank his coffee black and scalding, that he played piano when stressed. The penthouse had a grand piano he'd never told anyone about, and that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. They kept their relationship mostly private, careful. Teo's world was dangerous enough without advertising his vulnerabilities, but people noticed anyway. His organization, his rivals, the intricate network of informants and enemies that made up Seoul's underworld. "They're calling her the Black Queen," Min-jun reported one afternoon. Words out that Kang Tae-oh has someone. People are curious. Some are nervous. Good. Tae-oh didn't look up from the contracts he was reviewing. Let them be nervous. But the unease prickled at the base of his spine. Protection meant visibility. Visibility meant vulnerability. And Sage, despite her bravery, was fundamentally unaware of just how dangerous his life could become. He was proven right 3 weeks after their first date. Tae-oh was in a meeting with his accountants when his phone rang, the special line that only 3 people had access to. He answered immediately. "What?" "Boss." One of his security detail, voice tight. "Ms. Bennett's apartment. There's been a break-in." His vision went red at the edges. "Is she hurt?" "No, sir. She wasn't home. She's at the language academy. But someone went through her things, left a message." "What kind of message?" A pause. "You need to see this yourself." Tae-oh was moving before conscious thought, leaving. The meeting without explanation, Min-jun scrambling to follow. The drive to Itaewon took 12 minutes that felt like hours. His security team had already secured Sage's apartment. Police kept away with carefully placed phone calls and generous donations to the right people. The moment he walked through her door, Tae-oh understood why his guard had sounded shaken. Her apartment had been tossed. Drawers opened, clothes scattered, furniture moved. But it was the wall that made his blood freeze. Someone had spray-painted a message in red across her white living room wall. "Pretty bird in a cage. Fly away or burn." Below it, a single black feather had been pinned with a knife. "Security footage?" Tae-oh's voice was ice. "Disabled. Professional job." Min-jun was already on his phone, coordinating. "This wasn't random, boss. Someone wanted to send a message." They succeeded. Tae-oh stared at the wall, at the threat painted in the space where Sage slept and laughed and lived her life. Someone had violated her safety, her sanctuary. Someone had declared war by threatening the one thing he couldn't bear to lose. "Where is she now?" "Still at the academy. Her class ends in 20 minutes. Bring her to the penthouse. Don't tell her why, just that I need to see her. Keep the explanation minimal." Tae-oh turned to his head of security. "I want to know who did this by midnight. Check every camera in a 3-block radius. Pull traffic footage. Someone saw something. And Ms. Bennett's things? Pack everything. She's not coming back here." Min-jun's eyebrows rose. "Boss, she's not safe here." Tae-oh's hands were shaking. With rage or fear, he couldn't tell. This was a warning. The next move will be worse. I won't risk her. He knew what this meant. Bringing Sage into his world completely. Removing her ability to pretend his life was separate from hers. She'd resist. She'd argue. She'd probably be furious at his high-handedness. But she'd be alive. And that was all that mattered. Sage arrived at the penthouse 40 minutes later, escorted by 2 of Tae-oh's security team, who'd positioned themselves as polite but immovable forces. She walked through the door with her work bag slung over her shoulder, confusion and irritation warring on her face. "Tae-oh, what's going on? Your guys showed up at the academy like I was being extracted from a war zone." She stopped mid-sentence, taking in the penthouse properly for the first time. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than most cars, and in the corner, a black grand piano that caught the afternoon light. "This is where you live?" "Yes." He crossed to her, hands aching to touch her, but stopping just short. "We need to talk." Her eyes sharpened. "That's never a good opening." What happened? There was no gentle way to say it. Someone broke into your apartment this afternoon, left a message, a threat. The color drained from her face. What kind of threat? Teo pulled up the photos on his phone, hating that he had to show her, hating the way her breath caught when she saw the spray-painted words and the knife-pinned feather. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then handed the phone back. So this is what being with you means. Her voice was steady, but he heard the tremor underneath. People threatening me to get to you. I'm sorry. The words felt pathetically inadequate. I'll find who did this. They'll regret it. But Sage, you can't go back to that apartment. It's not safe. So what? I just move? Find a new place with better security? She wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture he hadn't seen from her before. Or do I leave Seoul? Because that's probably what they want, right? For me to disappear so you're not distracted. No. The word came out sharper than intended. You stay here, with me, where I can... protect you. Sage's head snapped up. I'm sorry, what? I have security throughout this building. The best surveillance systems money can buy. No one gets to these floors without clearance. You'll be safe here. Teo. She said his name with forced patience, like explaining something to a child. We've known each other for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And you want me to move into your penthouse because someone spray-painted my wall? They broke into your home, Sage. They know where you sleep. They know your schedule. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a calculated message. He stepped closer, needing her to understand. I can't protect you if you're scattered across the city. Please. Just until we figure out who's behind this and eliminate the threat. Eliminate? She latched onto the word. What does that mean, exactly? Teo held her gaze. It means I make sure they never threaten you again. Without killing them. The question hung between them. Finally, he said, I'll try. That's not exactly reassuring. But some of the tension left her shoulders. She moved to the windows, staring out at the city. I came to Seoul to be independent, to figure out who I am without someone else controlling my life. And now you're asking me to let you make decisions about my safety, my living situation. I'm asking you to let me keep you alive. He came up behind her, not touching, but close enough to feel her warmth. I know what this looks like. I know I'm being controlling and overbearing and probably violating a dozen boundaries. But Sage, I can't... His voice cracked. I can't lose you. Not like this. Not when I just found you. She turned, and her eyes were wet. You really think they'd hurt me? Yes. No hesitation. My world doesn't make idle threats. If someone took the time to break in and leave that message, they're establishing leverage. Next time, they won't just leave paint on the wall. Sage was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, she said, Okay. Okay. I'll stay. For now. Until this is resolved. She pointed at him, stern. But I'm not some damsel who needs constant watching. I still go to work, still live my life. And we need ground rules about privacy and space, and you not making unilateral decisions about my safety without consulting me first. Relief flooded through him so intensely he felt lightheaded. Agreed. Anything you want. Anything? A hint of her usual humor returned. That's a dangerous promise. With you, I'm learning to like dangerous. He finally gave in to the need to touch her, cupping her face gently. Thank you for trusting me with this. She leaned into his palm. Don't make me regret it. I won't. He sealed the promise with a kiss, soft and careful, trying to convey everything he couldn't say. The fear that had gripped him seeing that message, the possessive need to keep her close, the dawning realization that she'd become essential to his continued functioning. The kiss deepened, grew heated. Sage's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Teo lost himself in the taste of her, the feel of her curves pressed against him, the small sound she made when his teeth grazed her lower lip. His hand slid down to her waist, then lower, and he was just considering the logistics of the nearest surface when his phone rang. He ignored it. Sage laughed against his mouth. "You should probably." It rang again. And again. With a muttered curse in Korean that made her eyebrows rise, Teo answered without checking the ID. "What?" "Boss, we have a problem." His head of security sounded grim. "The camera footage. You need to see this." 20 minutes later, Teo stood in his office watching surveillance footage on a laptop, while Sage sat on the couch, arms wrapped around her knees. Min-jun had arrived with files and a carefully neutral expression. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A man in dark clothes and a baseball cap had entered Sage's building through the service entrance, using what looked like a copied keycard. He'd moved with purpose, head down to avoid cameras, gloved hands leaving no prints. The whole operation took less than 15 minutes. "Can you identify him?" Teo asked. "Not visually. But the keycard he used was cloned from the building manager's master. We traced the digital signature." His security chief pulled up another file. "The cloning equipment was purchased from a shop in Yongsan 3 days ago. Security footage from that shop shows our guy, but also shows who sent him." The image froze on a face Teo recognized immediately. His blood went cold. "Choi Jin-woo," Min-jun said quietly. "From the Incheon family." Choi Jin-woo. 28 years old, ambitious, reckless, the nephew of the family head who ran operations out of Incheon port. They'd clashed 6 months ago over territory in Bucheon, a dispute Teo had won through strategic acquisitions and carefully leveraged blackmail. Choi had backed down publicly, but clearly hadn't forgotten the humiliation. "He's escalating," Min-jun continued. "Our sources say he's been building support among the younger members of his family. They think his uncle's approach is too cautious, too deferential to established powers. Meaning you. So he threatens Sage to prove he's not afraid of me." Teo's voice was dead calm, which everyone in the room recognized as a warning sign. "Interesting strategy. Boss, what do you want to do?" Teo looked at Sage, who'd been listening with growing alarm. Their eyes met, and he saw her steel herself for what came next. "Set up a meeting," he said. "Tomorrow. Neutral ground. I'll speak with Choi Jin-woo personally about the consequences of his actions. And if he refuses?" "He won't refuse. Tell him I'm bringing a peace offering." Teo's smile was sharp enough to cut. "He'll be curious enough to come. What happens after that depends entirely on how the conversation goes." After his team left to make arrangements, Sage uncurled from the couch and came to stand beside him. "You're going to hurt him." "I'm going to make my position clear." "Teo," he turned to face her. "He came into your home, Sage. He touched your things. He left a threat meant to terrify you into leaving me. What would you have me do? Ask him nicely to stop? I'd have you not become the monster you're trying so hard not to be anymore." Her hand found his chest, resting over his heart. "You told me you stopped killing because you couldn't recognize yourself. Don't let this push you backwards. Even if it means keeping you safe. Especially then." Her eyes were fierce. "Because I don't want to be the reason you lose yourself. I'd rather leave than watch you destroy the person you fought to become." The words hit like a physical blow. Teo caught her wrist, held it against, his chest where his heart was racing. Don't even suggest leaving. Then promise me you'll find another way. Sage, promise me." She stepped closer, her free hand coming up to his face. "Please. For me. For us. Find a way to end this without becoming what you hate." He closed his eyes, breathing in her scent, letting her warmth ground him. The rage that had been building since seeing that spray-painted message slowly banked itself, still burning but controlled. When he opened his eyes, he said, "I promise I'll try. But if he escalates, if he comes near you again, then we deal with it together." She kissed him softly. "That's what being together means, right? Facing things as a team." "I've never been good at teams. Lucky for you, I'm an excellent teacher." That night, they moved Sage's belongings into one of the penthouse's guest rooms, a space with its own bathroom and sitting area, giving her the privacy she'd insisted on. Teo hated every inch of distance between her room and his, but he respected her boundaries. Barely. They ordered takeout and ate on the floor by the windows, watching Seoul's lights flicker to life. Sage told him about her students at the academy, young professionals learning English for business, their earnest questions, and occasional hilarious misunderstandings. Teo found himself relaxing, the violence of the day receding under the steady current of her presence. "Can I ask you something?" Sage said, setting down her chopsticks. "Always. The piano. Do you still play?" He followed her gaze to the instrument in the corner, dust-free, because his cleaning service maintained it weekly, but untouched by his hands in years. "Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. Will you play for me?" The request caught him off guard. Music was private, was the last piece of the boy he'd been before the accident. But looking at Sage's open, curious face, he found he wanted to share it. They moved to the piano. Teo sat on the bench, and Sage settled beside him, close enough that their thighs touched. He flexed his fingers, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first recital at age 8. "No judgment if I'm rusty," he warned. "Never." He started with something simple, a Chopin nocturne his sister had loved. The notes came haltingly at first, then with more confidence as muscle memory took over. The melody was melancholy and beautiful, speaking of loss and longing and the ache of remembering what used to be. When he finished, Sage rested her head on his shoulder. "That was beautiful. Sad, but beautiful. My sister used to request it every night before bed. Said it sounded like starlight." His throat felt tight. "I haven't played it since her funeral. Thank you for sharing it with me." She kissed his shoulder through his shirt. "Play something else. Something that sounds like right now." Teo thought for a moment, then began improvising. The melody started tentative, questioning, then grew stronger. It had light and shadow, tension and release, uncertainty transforming into something that felt like hope. His hands moved across the keys with growing confidence, and he realized he was playing Sage, the way she'd walked into his life, the chaos and beauty she'd brought, the way she made him feel terrifyingly alive. When the final notes faded, they sat in silence. Then Sage turned his face toward hers and kissed him with an intensity that made the world disappear. Teo pulled her onto his lap, the piano forgotten, and lost himself in her warmth. They kissed until breathing became difficult, until his control was hanging by a thread, until Sage pulled back with swollen lips and dark, wanting eyes. "We should stop," she whispered, but didn't move away. "Yes." His hands were still on her waist, thumbs tracing circles on her skin where her shirt had ridden up. "Before this goes somewhere we're not ready for." "Absolutely." He kissed her neck, felt her shiver. "Teo." "Sage." He forced himself to stop, to meet her eyes. "Go to your room. Now. Well, I can still let you." She studied his face, reading the desire and restraint warring there. Then she nodded, climbing off his lap with clear reluctance. "This is really hard. You have no idea." "Oh, I think I have some idea." Her gaze dropped pointedly, then back to his face with a wicked smile. "Good night, Teo. Try to get some sleep." "You're cruel. You like it." She blew him a kiss from the doorway, then disappeared down the hall. Teo sat at the piano for a long time after, trying to calm his racing heart, trying to memorize every detail of the evening. Tomorrow he'd face Choi Jinwoo. Tomorrow, there would be threats and negotiations, and the delicate dance of violence implied, but not spoken. But tonight, he'd played piano for a woman who made him want to be better, who trusted him, despite every reason not to, who somehow saw past the monster to the man he was desperately trying to remain. He pulled out his phone, texted, "I'm not sleeping. I'm thinking about you." Her response came quickly. "Good. Suffer with me. I'm thinking about you too." "What are you thinking about?" "Nothing YouTube appropriate. Good night, Teo. Be safe tomorrow." Always. Sleep well, Sage. But sleep didn't come. Instead, Teo spent the night planning exactly how to handle Choi Jin-woo, with enough force to end the threat, but enough restraint to keep his promise to Sage. It was a narrow path, and walking it would require every ounce of control he'd developed over the past decade. By dawn, he had a plan. The meeting was set for noon at a warehouse in Bucheon, neutral territory, equidistant from both their operations. Teo arrived with Min-jun and 4 security guards, all armed but with weapons concealed. The building was old, abandoned except for occasions like this when the underground needed space for delicate conversations. Choi Jin-woo was already there, leaning against an expensive car, with 3 of his own men flanking him. He was everything Teo had been warned about. Young, cocky, wearing designer clothes like armor and arrogance like cologne. "Kang Teo." Choi pushed off from the car, not bowing, not showing any of the respect hierarchy demanded. "I was surprised to get your invitation. Thought you might just send someone to break my kneecaps." "I considered it." Teo stopped 10 feet away, hands loose at his sides. "But I wanted to speak with you personally about boundaries." "Boundaries?" Choi laughed. "You mean the ones you cross constantly? Taking territory that's not yours, interfering in port operations, acting like you own Seoul?" "I don't own Seoul. I've simply been more effective at managing my operations than others." Teo kept his voice level. "But this isn't about business. You broke into an innocent woman's apartment. Left threats. That crosses a line that has nothing to do with territory or profit." "The American?" Choi's smile turned cruel. "Pretty thing. I saw pictures. She your weakness now, Teo? The thing that makes the ghost finally bleed?" Teo felt his control slip, caught it through sheer will. "She's off limits, permanently. Whatever issues you have with me, you address directly or not at all." "Or what? You'll kill me?" Choi spread his arms wide. "Everyone knows you don't have the stomach for it anymore. The old Kang Tayo would have already put a bullet in my skull. But you've gone soft. Weak. Not weak." Min-jun's voice cut through the tension. "Strategic. There's a difference." "Is there?" Choi took a step forward. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like fear. You're afraid of becoming your grandfather, so now you play nice. Make deals instead of examples. Let people disrespect you without consequences. Tayo could end this quickly. One signal and his men would move. Choi would disappear, his body never found. A message sent through his absence. It would be clean, efficient, final." But Sage's voice echoed in his head. "Don't let this push you backwards." "You're right," Teo said, and watched surprise flicker across Choi's face. "I have changed. I don't lead through fear and violence anymore. But you've made a critical miscalculation, Jinwoo. You've assumed that makes me weaker. It doesn't. It makes me more dangerous. Because now when I destroy someone, I do it in ways they never recover from." He pulled out his phone, pulled up a file, turned the screen toward Choi. "That's the documentation showing your uncle that you've been skimming from family operations for the past 8 months, embezzling, to fund your own ambitions. I have copies ready to send to him, to the other family heads, to law enforcement if necessary." Choi's face went pale. "You're bluffing." Am I? Test me. Teo pocketed his phone. Or we can make a deal. You leave Sage alone. You never speak her name, never look in her direction, never even think about her. You stop your territorial expansion in Buchan and stick to Incheon operations. And in return, I don't destroy your relationship with your family or your freedom. That's extortion. That's business. Teo's smile was cold. You wanted to see how I operate now? This is it. I don't kill people anymore, Jinwoo. I just make them wish I had. Choose. The silence stretched. Choi's jaw worked, rage and calculation battling in his expression. Finally, he spat on the ground. Fine. The American is off limits. But this isn't over, Teo. One day you'll slip, and when you do, when I do, you'll be too busy explaining your embezzlement to care. Teo turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Jinwoo? The next person who threatens her doesn't get a conversation. They just disappear. Spread the word. He walked away without waiting for a response, Min-jun falling into step beside him. They were almost to the car when Min-jun said quietly, "That was very restrained of you, boss. I made a promise." Teo's hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline and unspent violence. But if he tries again, he won't. You terrified him more with that file than you ever could with threats. Maybe. But the encounter left Teo feeling unsettled, like he'd walked a tightrope without a net. He'd kept his promise to Sage, but the cost was his reputation. Word would spread that Kong Teo had shown mercy again, had negotiated instead of eliminated. Others would test him. More threats would come. And next time, he might not be able to walk the line between the man he'd been and the man he was trying to become. When he returned to the penthouse, Sage was at the dining table with her laptop, grading assignments from her students. She looked up when he entered, and her eyes immediately went to his face, reading him with unsettling accuracy. "It's handled," she asked. "For now." He crossed to her, needing to touch her, to ground himself. His hand settled on her shoulders. "He won't bother you again." "Did you keep your promise?" Yes, he felt the tension leave her body. "But Sage, there will be others. Today solved one problem, but my world." She turned in her chair, taking his hands. "I know. I'm not naive about what being with you means, but we'll face it together, like we said. One threat at a time." The trust in her eyes humbled him. She should run, should leave him and Seoul and find safety somewhere far from his complicated, dangerous life. Instead, she was choosing to stay, choosing him, despite everything. "I don't deserve you," he said roughly. "Probably not." She smiled, tugging him down for a kiss. "But you're stuck with me anyway." That evening, they cooked dinner together. Or rather, Sage cooked, while Teo watched and occasionally helped under strict supervision. She was making jerk chicken with rice and peas, her mother's recipe, and the scents filled the penthouse with warmth and life it had never known. "You have to taste it," Sage insisted, holding up a spoon. "Tell me if it needs more Scotch bonnet." Teo leaned in, let her feed him. The flavors exploded on his tongue. Spicy, complex, perfect. "It's amazing." "You're biased," but she looked pleased. "My mom would make this every Sunday. Said it was taste of home, even when home was just wherever we happened to be living." She sounds like she was wonderful. She was. Sage's expression softened with memory. Strong, fierce, took no nonsense from anyone. She would have liked you, I think. Would have seen past the scary exterior to the man underneath. "I'm not sure there's much underneath worth seeing." "Stop that." She pointed the spoon at him. "You don't get to decide your own worth. That's my job now." "Your job?" "As the woman falling in love with you, yes." She said it casually, turning back to the stove, but Teo's world tilted. Sage, don't panic. I'm not asking you to say it back. I just wanted you to know. She stirred the pot, not looking at him. I'm falling in love with you, Teo. Despite my better judgment, despite the danger, despite having known you less than a month. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I needed to say it out loud. Teo crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, turned her to face him. Her eyes were bright, vulnerable, defiant all at once. Beautiful. I fell in love with you the moment you grabbed my wrist at Eclipse, he said, voice rough with emotion. Maybe even before that, the second I saw you dancing like you owned my whole world. I've been in love with you for weeks, Sage. Completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love with you. Her breath caught. Really? Really? He cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. I love you. Love your courage and your laugh, and the way you eat like food is a gift. I love that you challenge me and see me, and don't let me hide behind what I've done. I love you so much it scares me, because I don't know how to protect this, how to keep you safe while being who I am. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You love me. I love you, he repeated, and kissed her with everything he felt. The fear and joy and desperate need and overwhelming tenderness. She kissed him back just as fiercely, and something in his chest that had been clenched for a decade finally, fully released. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sage whispered, "The chicken's going to burn." "I don't care. I do. It's my mom's recipe." But she was laughing, kissing him again quickly before turning back to the stove. "We're having this conversation again after dinner, with dessert, and possibly wine. It's a deal." They ate on the floor again, Sage teaching him the proper way to eat jerk, chicken with your hands, both of them laughing when he got sauce on his nose. It was domestic and perfect, and nothing like the life Teo had imagined for himself, and it was everything he hadn't known he needed. After dinner, they moved to the couch. Sage curled into his side, her head on his chest, and they watched Soul's lights together in comfortable silence. Teo's hand traced patterns on her arm, and he felt more at peace than he had in years. "Teo?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. "What happens next? With us? What do you want to happen?" She was quiet for a moment. "I want to keep doing this, learning you, building something real. But I also know your world is complicated, dangerous. Are we just hiding up here? Or do I get to actually be part of your life?" The question was fair. He'd been keeping her separate, protected in the penthouse like a treasure locked away. But Sage wasn't an object to be hidden. She was a force, deserving of respect and inclusion. "Tomorrow night," he said, making a decision. "There's a charity gala, major business event, lots of Soul's elite. Will you come with me? As my partner? Publicly?" She sat up, eyes wide. "You want to introduce me? To everyone?" "Yes. I want them to know you're mine and I'm yours. I want to stop hiding what you mean to me." He caught her hand. "It'll make you more of a target. People will pay attention, make assumptions. But it'll also make clear that you are under my protection, that anyone who threatens you answers directly to me." Sage bit her lip, thinking, "This is a big step. The biggest." "Okay." She nodded slowly, then with more certainty. "Okay, let's do it. Let's stop hiding." Teo pulled her back into his arms, kissing the top of her head. Tomorrow they'd face his world together. Tonight they had this, the quiet, the warmth, the simple miracle of being in love. Outside, Soul continued its endless dance of light and shadow. But in the penthouse high above it all, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds held each other close and believed, just for tonight, that love might actually be enough. The gala was held at the Shilla Hotel, in a ballroom that dripped with old money and new power. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, and every face in the room belonged to someone who shaped Seoul's economy, politics, or underground networks, often all three simultaneously. Tae-oh adjusted his bow tie for the third time, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first meeting with rival family heads a decade ago. Min-jun watched with barely concealed amusement. "Boss, you've negotiated with Yakuza leaders and Russian arms dealers. Why are you nervous about a party?" "Because none of them mattered." Tae-oh checked his watch. Sage was finishing getting ready in the bedroom. Tonight matters. The door opened, and every thought in Tae-oh's head evaporated. Sage stood in the doorway wearing a gown the color of deep emerald that made her skin glow like polished mahogany. The dress hugged her curves before flowing to the floor, with a neckline that was elegant without being conservative. Her hair was styled in an intricate updo, loose curls framing her face, and she wore minimal jewelry, just gold earrings that caught the light when she moved. She was devastating. Regal. His. "Is it too much?" Sage asked, suddenly uncertain. "I can change." "Don't." Tae-oh's voice came out rough. He crossed to her, unable to look away. "Don't change anything. You're perfect." She smiled, shy and pleased. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He was wearing a custom black tuxedo, classic and sharp, but he barely registered his own appearance. All he could see was her, the way she held herself with quiet confidence, the way her eyes sparkled with nervous excitement, the way his world had narrowed to this woman and this moment. "Ready?" He offered his arm. "As I'll ever be." She took it, and they headed to the elevator. The drive to the hotel was quiet. Tae-oh kept her hand in his, thumb tracing circles on her palm, a gesture that had become habit, his way of grounding himself in her presence. Sage stared out the window at Seoul's nighttime elegance, and he could almost hear her thoughts spinning. "They're going to stare," he warned gently, "and talk. Some will be curious, some will be hostile. Korean society can be traditional about interracial relationships, and my world adds another layer of complication." "I know." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not fragile, Tae-oh. I've dealt with prejudice before, and anyone who has a problem with us can take it up with me directly." Her fierceness made him smile. "I love you. I love you too." She leaned over to kiss his cheek. "Now, let's go show Seoul what we look like together." They entered the ballroom to the subtle shift that accompanied Tae-oh's presence anywhere. Conversations pausing mid-sentence, eyes tracking his movement, the slight recalibration as people assessed his mood and adjusted their behavior accordingly. But tonight, those eyes lingered not on him, but on the stunning woman on his arm. Whispers followed them like a wake. Tae-oh felt Sage's spine straighten, her chin lift slightly, warrior posture disguised as elegance. He wanted to shield her from the attention, from the judgment, but he also recognized that she was handling it with more grace than he dared hope. Tai-o-si. An older man approached, Chairman Park, who ran one of Seoul's largest construction firms and occasionally needed Tae-oh's particular services. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Chairman Park." Tae-oh bowed slightly, the minimum required by politeness. "May I introduce Sage Bennett?" "Sage, this is Chairman Park of Daehan Construction." Sage extended her hand, Western style. "Pleasure to meet you, Chairman Park." Park looked, startled, but recovered quickly, shaking her hand. "Ms. Bennett, welcome to Seoul. How long have you been in Korea?" "A few months. I'm teaching at a language academy in Itaewon." Her Korean, while accented, was clear and respectful. "It's been wonderful exploring the city. And you've met Kang-si?" The question was delicate, probing. "At his club." Sage's smile was serene. "He was kind enough to ensure I got home safely. We've been inseparable since." The simple truth, delivered with confidence, left Park with no room for further questions. He murmured something polite and excused himself, already pulling out his phone, no doubt to spread this development through his network. "Well," Sage said quietly as they moved toward the bar, "that was easier than expected. That was reconnaissance. The real test comes when we meet the wives." He wasn't wrong. Within 15 minutes, they were surrounded by a cluster of elegantly dressed women, the wives and daughters of Seoul's elite, each one a power broker in her own right, despite never officially holding titles. They assessed Sage with the kind of thoroughness that would make intelligence agencies jealous. "Ms. Bennett," one woman said in perfect English, her smile sharp. "What an unusual pairing. How did you manage to capture Kung Si's attention?" The question was designed to insult, implying Sage had deliberately trapped him, that she was a gold digger or social climber. Teo felt his jaw tighten, but Sage just laughed. "I didn't capture anything. If anything, he chased me." She looked up at Teo with genuine warmth. "I'm just lucky he's as stubborn as he is handsome." The women blinked, recalibrating. This wasn't the response they'd expected, defensive or simpering or arrogant. Sage had simply told the truth with enough humor to disarm while maintaining her dignity. "And you're not concerned about his business interests?" another woman asked, the pause loaded with meaning. "I'm concerned that he works too hard and forgets to eat lunch." Sage's smile never wavered. "Everything else is between him and his conscience." Masterful. She'd acknowledged the question without confirming or denying knowledge, showed concern without judgment, and positioned herself as his partner rather than his morality police. Teo fell a little more in love with her. The evening continued in similar fashion. Sage charmed businessmen with questions about Korean industry, deflected invasive questions with grace, and somehow made every person she spoke with feel seen without revealing anything substantial about herself or their relationship. She was a natural, and Tayo realized she must have learned this skill during her law career, the ability to navigate hostile rooms with diplomacy and steel. They were standing by the windows overlooking the city when a voice interrupted. "Tayo, I didn't know you were bringing a date." Tayo turned, and his entire body went rigid. Jung Seo-yeon stood behind them in a silver gown, her smile pleasant, and her eyes calculating. She was beautiful in the way of a blade, all sharp edges and dangerous curves. She was also his ex, if the term could even apply to a relationship that had been more strategic alliance than romance. They'd dated briefly 3 years ago, an arrangement that had made sense on paper. Her father ran a pharmaceutical company. Their marriage would have merged empires. But Seo-yeon had wanted a trophy husband, someone to elevate her social standing while she pursued her own ambitions. Tayo had ended it when he realized she viewed him as an asset rather than a person. "Seo-yeon." His voice was cool, professional. "This is Sage Bennett. Sage, Jung Seo-yeon. Lovely to meet you." Seo-yeon's English was flawless, boarding school perfect. She extended her hand to Sage with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've heard so much about you already. The American teacher who's captured our Tayo's heart." Sage shook her hand, and Tayo saw her read the situation immediately. The way Seo-yeon positioned herself just slightly too close to him. The possessive note in "our Tayo." The subtle challenge in every word. "All good things, I hope." Mostly curious things. Seo-yeon turned to Tayo, deliberately excluding Sage from the conversation. "I wanted to discuss the merger proposal my father sent last week. We should schedule a meeting soon. There are details that require your personal attention." "Have your father contact my office." Tayo's tone made it clear the subject was closed. "But surely we could discuss it now, for old time's sake." Her hand landed on his arm, familiar and presumptuous. "It would be just like before, when we used to handle business over dinner. Remember those nights?" The implication was deliberate, designed to make Sage feel like an outsider, like she was interrupting something established and intimate. Teo felt rage building in his chest, not at Sage, but at Seo Yan's blatant disrespect, her assumption that she could undermine his relationship publicly. Before he could respond, Sage spoke. "I'm sure Teo remembers." Her voice was pleasant, unbothered, just like he remembers why those dinners ended. "But I appreciate you looking out for his business interests. It shows you care, even if the method is a bit transparent." Seo Yan's smile froze. "Excuse me? You're trying to make me jealous." Sage said it matter-of-factly, almost kindly. Using shared history to establish territorial claim. It's a classic move. I respect the strategy. But here's the thing. I don't get jealous of the past. I'm too busy enjoying the present. She turned to Tayo, rose on her toes, and kissed him softly. Not performative, not aggressive, just a simple kiss that conveyed intimacy and certainty. When she pulled back, her smile was genuine. "I'm going to get some air. Find me when you're done with business." "Sage," he started, but she was already walking away, crossing the ballroom with her head high, leaving him standing with an ex who'd just been gracefully decimated. Seo Yan's face had gone pale. "She's bold. She's honest." Teo removed Seo Yan's hand from his arm with deliberate care. "And for the record, I remember those dinners perfectly. I remember feeling like a business transaction instead of a person. I remember ending our arrangement because you saw me as an acquisition, not a partner." He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. "Sage sees me. That's why I love her. That's why whatever you're attempting here won't work. We're done, Seo Yan. Permanently. Contact my office for business. Don't contact me personally again." He left her standing there and went to find Sage. She was on the terrace, leaning against the railing, staring at Seoul's impossible expanse of lights. The night air was cold, and Tayo shrugged off his jacket, without thinking, draping it over her shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. Seo Yan was out of line. You should have nothing." Sage turned to face him, and to his surprise, she was smiling. "You can't control what your ex does, only how you respond, and you made it very clear where you stand. You're not upset? About her trying to mark territory?" Sage shrugged, his jacket dwarfing her frame. "Please, I grew up with a brother in the military, and worked in a law firm full of alpha personalities. I know how to handle people who underestimate me. You handled her perfectly." Teo moved closer, unable to stop himself from touching her, hands on her waist, pulling her against him. "But I hated seeing someone disrespect you. Made me want to what? Defend my honor?" She was teasing, but her eyes were warm. "I can defend myself, Teo, but I appreciate the impulse. Shows you care. I more than care." His hand slid up her back, feeling her warmth through the thin fabric. "I'm completely, irrationally, possessively in love with you." "Good." She wound her arms around his neck. "Because I feel the same way." They kissed under the stars, Seoul sprawling below them like a promise. The kiss was soft at first, tender, then deepened into something that made Teo's control slip dangerously. Sage's fingers tangled in his hair, her body pressed flush against his, and he forgot where they were, forgot the gala happening inside, forgot everything except the taste of her and the desperate need building in his chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sage's lips were swollen and her eyes dark with want. "We should go back inside. Or," his voice was rough, "we could leave, go home, continue this conversation somewhere private." "That's a terrible idea." But she was already nodding. "Let's go." They made their excuses. Early morning meetings, exhaustion, polite lies that fooled no one. The drive back to the penthouse felt endless. Tayo kept her hand in his, and the air between them felt electric, charged with anticipation and barely restrained desire. The elevator ride was torture. They stood on opposite sides, not touching, but the awareness was overwhelming. Sage's chest rose and fell with quick breaths, her eyes locked on his, and Teo gripped the elevator railing to keep from crossing the space and taking what he wanted right there. The doors opened. They made it 3 steps into the penthouse before control shattered. Teo pulled her against him, kissing her with all the hunger he'd been suppressing for weeks. Sage responded with equal intensity, her hands pulling at his bow tie, his shirt, trying to get closer. They stumbled through the living room, lips never separating, shedding formal wear like armor they no longer needed. "Bedroom," Sage gasped between kisses. "Teo, bedroom." He lifted her without effort, her legs wrapping around his waist, and carried her down the hall. They fell onto his bed, a bed he'd slept in alone for years, a space that had never known warmth or laughter or love. Until now. What happened next was beyond words, beyond YouTube-appropriate description. It was tender and fierce, desperate and careful, years of loneliness and longing channeling into something that felt like healing. Teo learned every sound she made, every touch that made her gasp, every way he could worship her body and soul. Sage learned his scars, physical and emotional, and kissed every damaged part of him until he believed, for the first time in a decade, that he might be worth saving. They came together like a storm finally breaking, and afterward, they lay tangled in sheets and each other, hearts racing, skin cooling in the quiet darkness. Teo held her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, and thought, This is what I've been missing. This is home." "I love you," he whispered, into her hair. "I love you, too." Sage's fingers traced patterns on his chest, lazy and content. "That was perfect," he finished. "You're perfect." She laughed softly. "I'm really not. But I'm glad you think so." They drifted in comfortable silence, Teo's hand stroking her back, Sage's breathing slowing into something peaceful. He thought she'd fallen asleep when she spoke again, voice small. "Teo, what happens in the morning?" He went still. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." She propped herself up on one elbow, meeting his eyes. "Do you regret this? Do we pretend it didn't happen? Do you go back to being the untouchable crime lord, and I go back to being the temporary distraction?" The fear in her voice broke something in him. He cupped her face, forcing her to see the truth in his expression. "In the morning, I wake up next to the woman I love. We have coffee. We figure out breakfast. And we keep building this, us, one day at a time. Nothing about. You is temporary, Sage. You're permanent. You're everything. You mean that? I've never meant anything more." He kissed her softly. "Stay. Not just tonight. Stay in my room, in my bed, in my life. Permanently." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Yes. God, yes." They made love again, slower this time, with the sweetness of certainty rather than the desperation of need. And when they finally slept, wrapped around each other, Teo felt peace for the first time since his family died. But peace, in his world, never lasted long. He woke to his phone ringing. The emergency line. The clock read 4:47 a.m. Beside him, Sage stirred but didn't wake. Teo extracted himself carefully, grabbed the phone, and stepped into the hallway. "What?" His voice was cold, all business despite the warmth still radiating from the bedroom. "Boss." His head of security sounded tense. "We have a situation. Choi Jin-woo's body was found an hour ago in Incheon, shot twice, execution style." Teo's blood went cold. "I didn't order that." "I know, sir. But someone made it look like you did. The weapon was one of ours, stolen from a storage facility 3 weeks ago. Witnesses place a car matching your fleet near the scene. The Incheon family thinks you broke your agreement and killed their nephew." "God." Tayo ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. They'll retaliate. They already are. Our sources say they're mobilizing. And boss, a pause. They know about Ms. Bennett. If they think you killed Choi, she becomes the target. The world tilted. Everything in Tayo screamed to run back to the bedroom, to grab Sage and disappear to somewhere safe. But he forced himself to think strategically. Lockdown protocol. Triple security on the building. Contact Min-jun and get him here now. And find out who's trying to start a war. Already working on it. But boss, if the Incheon family comes, they won't get past the lobby. Tayo's voice was steel. I'll die before they touch her. He ended the call and stood in the hallway, watching dawn creep across the windows. Inside the bedroom, Sage slept peacefully, still wrapped in his sheets, unaware that someone was using their relationship to start a war, unaware that she'd become the most valuable target in Seoul's underworld. Tayo made a decision. He would end this, whatever conspiracy was trying to destroy him. But first, he would make sure Sage was safe, even if it meant sending her away, even if it meant breaking his own heart to keep hers beating. He returned to the bedroom, memorizing her peaceful face, the way morning light painted gold across her skin. Then he gently woke her. Sage, baby, wake up. Her eyes fluttered open, and her smile when she saw him made his chest ache. Morning already? What time is it? Early. Too early. He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. Something's happened. I need you to listen, carefully. The sleep cleared from her eyes immediately, replaced by sharp attention. What's wrong? He told her everything. Choi's death, the frame job, the impending retaliation. With every word, he watched her face shift from shock to fear, to, finally, determination. Okay, she said when he finished. What do we do? You need to leave Seoul, today. I'll arrange a flight to... No. She sat up fully, sheet clutched to her chest. Absolutely not. Sage, this isn't negotiable. If the Incheon family, if they want to hurt you, they'll use me, whether I'm here or halfway around the world. Her eyes blazed. Running just proves I'm a weakness. Staying proves I'm your partner, that we face threats together. You could die. So could you. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I'm not leaving you to deal with this alone. Either we figure it out together, or I stay, and we face whatever comes. Those are the only options. Tayo wanted to argue, to force her onto a plane, to use every resource at his disposal to keep her safe. But looking at her fierce, determined face, he realized two things. First, she would never forgive him for making that choice for her. Second, she was right. Running solved nothing. Together, he finally said. Together. They dressed quickly. Sage in jeans and one of his sweaters. Tayo in his usual black. By the time they emerged from the bedroom, Min-jun had arrived with his full security team. The penthouse had transformed from sanctuary to war room. Talk to me, Tayo ordered. Min-jun pulled up footage on a laptop. We traced the car that was spotted near Choi's murder scene. It was reported stolen 2 days ago from our fleet garage. Professional job, no witnesses. The weapon used was taken from our Songpa storage facility 3 weeks ago during a system malfunction that we now know was cover for the theft. Someone inside. Tayo's jaw tightened. Someone with access to our operations. We're running internal checks, but boss, whoever this is has been planning for weeks. They knew about your meeting with Choi, knew about Ms. Bennett, knew exactly how to frame you for a murder that starts a war. Sage, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. Who benefits from you and the Incheon family destroying each other? Everyone turned to stare at her. She shrugged. I'm a lawyer. First rule, follow the money and motive. If both families go to war, you weaken each other. Who fills the power vacuum? It was brilliant. Obvious in hindsight, but easy to miss in the heat of crisis. Teo's mind raced through the hierarchy of souls underground. The Gwangju organization. They've been trying to expand into Seoul for years. If Inchin and I eliminate each other, they walk right in. Minjun was already pulling up files. Their leader is Kim Young-chul, former intelligence officer, known for elaborate operations and long-term planning. Find him. Teo's voice was ice. And get me a meeting with the Incheon family head. I need to explain what's happening before they make a move they can't take back. The next 12 hours were tense negotiation and careful investigation. Teo met with Choi's uncle, showed evidence of the frame job, convinced him to delay retaliation until they could identify the real killer. Sage stayed at the penthouse under heavy guard, but she didn't sit idle. She used her legal training to piece together timeline and evidence, building a case against Kim Young-chul that would hold up under scrutiny. By evening, they had enough. Taeyo's team tracked Kim to a warehouse in Gwangju, caught him with documentation of the entire conspiracy. The stolen car, the weapon, even communications with a mole in Taeyo's organization. The evidence was irrefutable. "What do you want to do with him?" Minjun asked. Teo looked at Sage, who stood beside him in his office, exhausted, but unbowed. She met his eyes, and he saw the trust there, trust that he would make the right choice. Turn everything over to the Inchin family and the prosecutor's office. His decision surprised everyone in the room. Let the legal system handle him. And our mole, public trial, evidence of betrayal. I'm done with shadows and violence. We do this the right way. It was revolutionary, unheard of, but it sent a clear message. Kang Tae-oh was changing the rules. His organization would adapt or be replaced. The next week passed in a blur of statements and negotiations. Kim Young-chul was arrested, the mole identified and prosecuted, and an uneasy peace settled over Seoul's underground. Teo had proven he could end threats without bloodshed, and his reputation shifted. No longer the ghost who killed without feeling, but the strategist who won without firing a shot. Through it all, Sage stayed beside him. She attended meetings, offered perspective, challenged his assumptions, and reminded him why he'd changed his methods in the first place. She became an unofficial advisor, the woman who'd walked into his life and shifted its entire trajectory. 1 month after the crisis ended, Teo woke to find Sage already up, standing by the windows in his shirt, watching Seoul come to life. He joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different my life would be if I'd thrown that dart at literally any other country." She leaned back into him. "I'd never have met you. Never known this feeling. Fate. Maybe." She turned in his arms. "Or maybe we just make good decisions when it counts." Speaking of which, I've been thinking. About the fact that I'm living with you, working with you, completely integrated into your life. But we've never really talked about what that means long term. Teo's heart began to race. "What do you want it to mean?" "I want forever." She said it simply, without artifice. "I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want to build something lasting. Not just survive your world, but create our own world within it. I want..." He kissed her, cutting off the words because his heart was too full for speaking. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Sage blinked. "What?" "Marry me, Sage Bennett. Not because it's logical or strategic, or because we've been dating the appropriate amount of time. Marry me because I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. Because you're my home and my future, and the reason I want to become better. Marry me because I can't imagine a single day without you." Tears streamed down her face. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious." He pulled a small box from his pocket. He'd been carrying it for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Inside was a ring, a simple band, with an emerald, the color of her gala dress, surrounded by small diamonds. I know I should have planned something elaborate. Should have asked properly. Yes. She was laughing and crying simultaneously. God, yes. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Because he'd stolen her size from another ring, had the stone custom cut, had been planning this moment since the night she'd first slept in his bed. They kissed until breathing became difficult, until the world narrowed to just them and this promise. When? Sage asked against his lips. Tomorrow. Next week. Whenever you want. Teo pulled back to look at her, memorizing her joy. Or we could do it now. I know someone who can arrange a ceremony by this afternoon. She laughed. Let's wait at least a month. Give me time to plan something. Invite my brother. Do this properly. 1 month. He could survive that. Barely. But you're staying in this room until then, permanently. No, more pretending we need separate spaces. Deal. She kissed him again, sweet and certain. I love you, Teo. Thank you for finding me, for grabbing my hand and not letting go. Thank you for dancing with me, he said, for seeing past what I was to what I could become. They stood wrapped in each other as soul woke around them, two people who'd found impossible love in the most unlikely circumstances. And somewhere in the city below, life continued, dangerous and beautiful and uncertain. But here, in the penthouse high above it all, they had everything that mattered, each other, a future they'd fight for, and love strong enough to weather whatever storms came next. 6 months later. The wedding was small, intimate, just Minjun and Sage's brother Marcus, who'd flown in from Germany, and immediately bonded with Tayo over protective older sibling tendencies, along with a handful of trusted friends and associates. They married on the penthouse terrace at sunset, soul glittering below them like scattered stars. And when Tayo kissed his wife for the first time, he felt complete in a way he'd never imagined possible. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Jeju Island, where they walked on black sand beaches and talked about the future. Sage wanted to open a legal aid clinic for foreign workers in Seoul. Tayo wanted to restructure his legitimate businesses while slowly divesting from the underground operations. They made plans, dreamed together, built a vision of the life they'd create. When they returned to Seoul, Sage was quieter than usual, lost in thought. Tayo noticed. Of course he noticed, but gave her space to process whatever was occupying her mind. 3 days after their return, she found him in his office reviewing contracts. Can we talk? She looked nervous, which was unusual enough to make him set down his pen immediately. Always. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think so. She sat on the edge of his desk, took his hand. I'm pregnant. Time stopped, restarted. Teo stared at her, trying to process the words. You're about 8 weeks, according to the doctor. I found out yesterday, but wanted to be sure before telling you. Her eyes searched his face, worried. I know we didn't plan this. No, your world is dangerous for children. But Teo, I want this. I want us to have a family. If you're not ready. He pulled her into his lap, buried his face in her neck, and felt tears burn behind his eyes. I'm ready. God, Sage, I'm so ready. I never thought, after my family died, I never imagined having this again. A child. A future. Hope. So you're happy? She pulled back to see his face. I'm terrified and ecstatic, and so in love with you I can barely breathe. He kissed her, tasting salt and joy. We're having a baby. We're having a baby, she confirmed, laughing through her own tears. That night, they lay in bed, Teo's hand on Sage's, still flat stomach, and talked about names and nurseries, and all the ways they would protect this new life they'd created. He told her about his sister, about how much she would have loved being an aunt. Sage told him about her mother, about the grandmother their child would never meet, but would know through stories. They'll grow up in a different world than we did, Teo said quietly. Safer. Happier. With parents who actually survived long enough to raise them. They'll grow up knowing they're loved. Sage covered his hand with hers. That's what matters. Everything else we'll figure out together. Together, he agreed.